Denver welcomed October with a scattering of golden leaves and a cool breeze. Sawyer Blackwood stood at the panoramic window of her 20th floor office, gazing out at the cityscape. In her 32 years, she'd achieved what she dreamed of, becoming the top realtor at Mile High Estates. In the past 3 years, she had closed deals totaling over $15 million, making her the most successful real estate agent in Denver. Her dark hair was gathered in a tight bundle, and her impeccable ivory suit emphasized her status. Her ring finger had long been free of her wedding ring. Her divorce had become a new point of reference for her. Since then, Sawyer was completely immersed in work, turning her office into a real work of art. Minimalist interior in gray tones, expensive furniture, and live orchids created an atmosphere of success. The phone on her desk vibrated. A message from Mercy Crawford, her only close friend since college. "Can we meet? Need some advice right away." Sawyer frowned. The usually cheerful Mercy didn't write messages like this. They'd been friends for 15 years, since their freshman year at the University of Colorado Springs, where they'd both studied economics. An hour later, they were sitting in their favorite coffee shop on Larimer Street. Mercy, a petite blonde with a scattering of freckles on her nose, was twirling a cup of latte in her hands. Her blue eyes were full of worry, and her face lacked its usual smile. "Dexter's changed," she finally uttered. "Stays late at work, hides his phone, and yesterday I found a check from a restaurant for 2 people. That night he said he was working late at his law office." Sawyer listened intently, noting familiar signs. Over the past year, she'd helped several friends expose unfaithful husbands. It had become her hobby to help women discover the truth. After all, she'd been through betrayal herself and knew how painful it was to live in ignorance. "Maybe I'm exaggerating?" Mercy nervously rubbed her napkin. "We've been married 7 years. We have a beautiful home in the Highlands, mutual friends, plans for the future. He's always been the perfect husband." "I can help verify your suspicions," Sawyer said slowly. "I have connections, and I know how to handle situations like this. The key is to stay calm and not show Dexter your suspicions." "You're really going to help?" Mercy's eyes filled with hope. "I don't know what to do. I can't sleep at night, constantly checking his phone whenever I get the chance. It's driving me crazy." "Of course I'll help. That's what friends are for." Sawyer finished her Americano and pulled out a leather-bound day planner. "Tell me more about his daily routine, his friends, the places he goes, and give me a week. I'll check it all out." That evening, back in her spacious apartment in Union Station, Sawyer stood under the hot shower for a long time, contemplating the situation. She knew that helping Mercy was a matter of principle. After all, every woman deserved to know the truth, no matter how bitter it might be. After her shower, Sawyer poured herself a glass of red wine and stepped out onto the balcony. The lights of evening Denver twinkled below, and the cool fall wind brought the smell of fallen leaves. She thought about how her life had changed over the past few years, from a naive girl in love to a successful independent woman. In the morning, Sawyer woke up with a clear plan of action. She knew what to do. In her years as a realtor, she had learned to be attentive to detail and find the information she needed. Opening her closet, she selected a dark blue suit and a white silk blouse. An important client meeting today, and then she needed to start a discreet investigation for Mercy. Before heading out, Sawyer checked Dexter Crawford's email and social media. Everything looked perfect. Pictures of the happy couple, activities together, comments from friends. But she knew picture perfect often hid an unpalatable truth, and she would find it. Sawyer spent 2 weeks tracking Dexter Crawford. She studied his work schedule, his routes, his social circle. She created a fake social media profile under the name Rachel Hunter, an attractive businesswoman in her 30s who had recently moved to Denver. Dexter fell for the scam on the 3rd day. After a few innocent comments under his posts, a correspondence began. He eagerly talked about his work at the law firm, shared his weekend plans, complained about his workload. He never mentioned his wife. After a week of communication, Dexter suggested they meet at the Golden Lounge Bar in the downtown business district. Sawyer hired a professional actress, Carrie, who looked like the fake profile picture. She was to record the entire meeting on a hidden camera. On the appointed evening, Dexter showed up at the bar in full dress, an expensive suit, polished shoes, new perfume. Carrie reported later that he was extremely persistent, tried to take her hand several times and hinted at continuing the evening in a more intimate setting. Sawyer compiled all the evidence into a separate folder: correspondence, photos, videos of the encounter. She procrastinated for days, searching for the right words. Finally, she invited Mercy to her apartment. "Sit down." Sawyer pointed her friend to the couch. "What I'm going to show you won't be pleasant, but you need to know the truth." Mercy looked through the contents of the folder in silence. Only the fingers clutching the teacup trembled visibly. When the last page was read, she raised her eyes to Sawyer. "I guessed." Her voice sounded muffled. "I just didn't want to believe it." "I'm sorry." Sawyer sat down next to her, putting her arm around her friend's shoulders. 7 years of marriage. Mercy shook her head. 7 years down the drain. And for what? For some random fling? The next few days became a whirlwind of events. Mercy packed her bags and moved in with her parents. The lawyer prepared the divorce papers. Dexter, when pressed for evidence, first denied everything, then tried to justify himself. Finally just signed the papers. Sawyer watched her friend's life fall apart. Mercy had lost weight, slimmed down, lost her usual spunk. She spent evenings on the couch in Sawyer's apartment, swallowing tears and red wine. "You know what the most frustrating thing is?" she'd say. "I mean, I did everything for him, supported him when he was just starting his career, gave up my own ambitions to create the perfect home for him. And he?" Sawyer silently stroked her friend's back. She remembered her own divorce, remembered the gut-wrenching pain of betrayal, but she also remembered that time heals. You just have to get through the first, hardest period. "You're strong," she told Mercy. "You'll get through this, and I'll be there for you." Slowly, life began to get better. Mercy found a new job at a marketing agency. She rented a small apartment in Capitol Hill, started going to the gym. The divorce was finalized in 3 months. Dexter didn't contest the terms of the property division. Sawyer often thought about how many more stories like this happen every day. How many women live with betrayers without realizing it? How many fates are shattered by male perfidy? One evening, while going through her mail, she came across a strange letter. A woman named Ruby Trent asked for help checking on her husband. "Suspecting infidelity," she wrote, "willing to pay for information." Sawyer drummed her fingers on the desk thoughtfully. Mercy's story showed she could help other women discover the truth. Perhaps this was her calling. She opened a new document and began typing a response. The story with Ruby Trent had proved to be a turning point in Sawyer Blackwood's life. The website took 2 weeks to create: a concise design, intuitive controls, a simple form to fill in data. Fidelity Testing Agency was the name she gave to her project, spending a significant amount of money on social media promotion. Ruby became the first official client. She came to Sawyer's office for a meeting, a tall brunette in her mid-30s wearing an expensive tweed suit. She had the aura of a successful woman accustomed to being in control. "My husband, Hunter Trent, owns a chain of sports clubs in Colorado Springs," Ruby told her, nervously adjusting her pearl necklace. "We've been married for 8 years. The last 6 months he's been acting strange. Constant business trips, late returns home, a new young secretary." Sawyer carefully jotted down details in her notebook. Hunter's habits, his daily routine, his social circle, his favorite places. Everything could be useful in the investigation. "I want to know the truth." Ruby placed an envelope on the table. "Here's a down payment of $5,000. If you confirm my suspicions, you'll get the same amount more." Following Hunter, Trent was proving more difficult than previous cases. He was careful, changing routes, checking for surveillance. Sawyer had to use a professional detective for surveillance. A week later, the first results came in. Hunter was indeed dating his secretary, 23-year-old Ashley Morris. They dined at restaurants, attended private parties, and stayed at the Broadmoor Hotel. Sawyer compiled an impressive dossier of photos, videos, phone records, credit card statements. The picture of infidelity was clear and ugly. Ruby took the news surprisingly calmly. "I knew it," she said, reviewing the evidence. "Now my lawyer will make the divorce as favorable to me as possible." After her success with the Trent case, the flow of clientele increased. Word of mouth worked well. Cheating wives recommended Sawyer's services to their friends. She hired 2 assistants, rented an additional office, installed a serious security system. The work brought not only money, but also moral satisfaction. Sawyer felt that she was doing an important job, helping women learn the truth, relieving them of illusions, giving them a chance to start a new life. The real estate business gradually moved to the background. Sawyer transferred most of the clients to colleagues, leaving herself only the largest deals. The new profession captured her completely. Every morning she looked through dozens of applications on the website. Most had to be screened out. Too vague suspicions, not enough information, unrealistic expectations. But some stories caught her eye immediately. The office she'd set up for the new tasks. There was special surveillance equipment, secure servers for storing information, a state-of-the-art video surveillance system. On the wall hung a map of Colorado, dotted with colorful flags, the locations of operations. In the evenings, Sawyer often stayed up late, analyzing investigative materials. She noticed patterns in the behavior of unfaithful husbands, learned to anticipate their actions, improved methods of work. Mercy, recovering from her divorce, supported her friend's endeavor. "You're doing a good thing," she said. "If it weren't for you, a lot of women would be living a lie for years." Sawyer realized that her activities teetered on the edge of the law. Technically, she wasn't breaking any rules, just gathering information from public sources. But the moral and ethical side of the issue sometimes kept her up at night. Ruby Trent's case ended in a high-profile divorce trial. Hunter lost half his fortune and control of the business. Ashley Morris quit her job and disappeared from town. And Sawyer gained another grateful clientele and recommendations in the highest circles of Colorado Springs. The business was growing. Sawyer hired a programmer to improve the website, set up 24-hour customer support, and developed a confidential storage system. She was building an empire based on female mistrust and male infidelity. Behind the luxurious facade of a successful business lurked a dark side: broken families, broken fortunes, ruined reputations. But Sawyer convinced herself she was only bringing the truth to light. After all, she wasn't the one destroying these marriages. She was only showing reality for what it was. In the evenings, looking through the files on the next unfaithful husbands, Sawyer found herself thinking more and more often that mere exposure wasn't enough. Hunter Trent, despite his divorce and the loss of his business, continued his adventures, now with a new mistress, a yoga instructor from his club. The plan didn't come together right away. Sawyer had scrutinized Hunter's daily routine, his new habits. He rented a suite at the Antlers Hotel in Colorado Springs for dates. Every Thursday, 9 p.m., she'd prepared herself carefully. Wig, dark glasses, inconspicuous clothes. The maid's license was a perfect fake. The thin latex gloves left no prints. His mistress was late that night. Hunter waited alone, sipping whiskey by the window. When he heard a knock on the door, he opened it without asking. He was waiting for his new fling. The blow with the heavy crystal ashtray was accurate. The second was a check. Sawyer acted calmly and methodically, as if she were doing her usual job. Wiped off the ashtray, put everything back the way it was. Leaving the hotel through the service entrance, she felt not fear or remorse, but satisfaction. Justice had been served, and that was just the beginning. The body was found by the maids the next morning. The police wrote it off as a robbery. The room had been ransacked, wallet and watch gone. Perfect staging. Sawyer went back to her regular job, meeting with clients, gathering evidence of cheating, investigating. But now she had another mission, a secret trial for those who deserved real punishment. Iris Pierce contacted the Sawyer agency in early December. She had doubts about her fiancé, the successful trader Fletcher Reed. The wedding was a month away. The invitations had been sent out. The restaurant booked. "Something doesn't add up," Iris told her, nervously rubbing her engagement ring with a large diamond. "Fletcher says he's traveling to Denver for work, but his co-workers claim he's taking days off." Sawyer studied Fletcher, 42 years old, divorced, no children, successful Wall Street trader who moved to Colorado 3 years ago. Met Iris at a charity event, proposed 6 months later. Surveillance showed a pretty ugly picture. Fletcher did go to Denver to see his ex-wife. They met at her apartment, went out to restaurants, planned a future together, and in Boulder, he was playing the part of the lovelorn fiancé. Studying the surveillance footage, Sawyer felt a familiar rage. After the Hunter Trent incident, she'd realized some men deserved more than exposure. Fletcher had turned out to be just as cocky as Hunter. The same expensive suits, the same condescending smile, the same contempt for women's feelings. He planned to marry Iris without severing his relationship with his ex-wife. The plan had matured quickly. Sawyer picked a day when Fletcher was going on another business trip. She knew he would go to the Grand Hyatt Hotel in Denver, where he rented a room for meetings. This time it went even cleaner. A sleeping pill and a glass of wine that the waitress brought to the room. The overdose looked like an accident. Fletcher had been found to have a prescription for strong sleeping pills. Iris was inconsolable upon learning of her fiancé's death. She did not suspect his double life. Sawyer decided not to reveal the truth. Let her better remember him faithful than learn of his betrayal. 2 cases in different cities, different MOs, no connection between the victims, except one that was known only to Sawyer. She was creating a new kind of justice, for those who thought themselves invulnerable. The agency kept going. Clients streamed in, each with her own story of deception. Sawyer listened carefully, gathered evidence, investigated, and selected those who deserved the ultimate punishment. She treated her new mission like a job, carefully planned, left no trace, created impeccable alibis. By day, a successful family detective, by night, a master of secret justice. The police didn't connect the cases. Hunter's death was ruled a robbery, Fletcher's an accident. Perfect crimes leave no trace and arouse no suspicion. In the evenings, alone in her apartment, Sawyer looked through the new files. Among the dozens of cases of ordinary infidelity, she looked for special ones, those who deserved not just exposure, but real retribution. The Antlers Motel was in turmoil. Police cars with blinkers surrounded the building, yellow tape cordoning off curious onlookers. The maid who had discovered Hunter Trent's body was still giving statements to the officers, nervously adjusting her uniform apron. Detective First Class Griffin Vaughn arrived on the scene 20 minutes after the call. A tall African-American with a streak of gray in his short-cropped hair, he was known for his methodical approach to investigations. The 4th-floor suite looked like a wrestling match. Overturned chairs, broken glasses, traces of blood on the light-colored carpet. Hunter's body lay by the window, a bloody ashtray lying nearby. "What do we got?" Vaughn turned to the CSI who was photographing the evidence. Hunter Trent, 43, owner of a chain of gyms. Divorced 6 months ago. Cause of death is multiple blows to the head with a heavy object. Estimated time of death between 9 and 10 p.m. Vaughn looked around the room. His wallet and expensive watch were missing, but the credit cards were still intact. A strange robbery. "Interview the staff," he ordered. "Who saw Mr. Trent last night? Who did he meet with?" The porter remembered that Hunter had been expecting a woman, a young brunette with dark glasses. She'd gone up to see him around 9 o'clock. The security cameras showed only a blurred silhouette. By late afternoon, police had several leads. A robbery gone wrong. Jealous husband of one of the mistresses. Business conflict. Trent had plenty of detractors after his divorce and property division. Ex-wife Ruby provided an alibi. The whole evening she spent at a charity reception in the presence of dozens of witnesses. Hunter's current girlfriend, a yoga instructor, was also clean, led a group class. Vaughn sensed something didn't add up. The robbery was staged too professionally. The murder was too cleanly executed. No prints, no DNA. Going through the case files, the detective came across an oddity. Over the past few months, Hunter had regularly checked into different hotels in Colorado Springs. Always on Thursdays, always suites. "Check the guest lists," he instructed his assistant. Maybe our mystery brunette has shown up before, but the search was fruitless. The woman had vanished into thin air. The only clue was the camera footage, a blurred silhouette in dark clothing. After a week, the investigation reached a dead end. Robbery became the primary theory, though Vaughn continued to have doubts. Something told him this was just the beginning. In his office, the detective hung Hunter Trent's picture on the unsolved cases board. Next to the victim's watch and a bloody ashtray lay the forensics report. The killer knew what he was doing, and it might not be the last time. Detective Griffin Vaughn sat at his desk, studying the reports on the Hunter Trent case. 3 weeks of investigation had yielded no results. The killer had left no trace. Witnesses had seen nothing. Cameras showed only a blurred silhouette. Flipping through the news feed, he came across a story about Fletcher Reed's death in Denver. The successful trader was found dead in a room at the Grand Hyatt Hotel. The suspected cause is an overdose of sleeping pills. Something about the story caught the detective's attention. He requested the case file from his Denver colleagues. 2 days later, the file was on his desk. Fletcher Reed, 42, engaged, worked as a trader. Found dead in a hotel room. An empty wine glass and scattered sleeping pills. Denver PD ruled it an accident. Vaughn methodically compared the 2 cases. At first glance, nothing in common. Different cities, different methods of murder, different victims. But something was bugging him. He started digging deeper. He looked into the backgrounds of both victims. Hunter Trent, recently divorced, multiple affairs. Fletcher Reed, engaged, secretly seeing his ex-wife. The detective put together a timeline. Trent's murder, Thursday, 9 p.m. Reed's death. Also Thursday, about the same time. Both in expensive hotels, both waiting for women. Something about Reed's case caught his attention. The maid's statement. An hour before the trader died, she saw a woman in a dark business suit coming up to the room. Cameras only caught a silhouette. Vaughn called the Grand Hyatt Hotel. The desk clerk confirmed. Reed was a regular Thursday night renter. So did Trent in Colorado Springs. The detective put both photos on the board, tied a red string between them, started writing out the coincidences. Thursday, evening, hotel, woman in dark clothes, infidelity of the victims. He requested information on similar cases in other Colorado cities, checked databases for similar deaths. Nothing so far, but his gut told him this was just the beginning. That evening, Vaughn sat in his office, staring at a board of photographs. 2 dead men, 2 hotels, 2 women in dark clothes. Too many coincidences for coincidence. He went to Denver the next day, met with the detectives working on Reed's case. They considered suicide the primary theory. The trader had debts, a gambling problem. But Vaughn sensed there was one man behind these deaths. Someone methodical, cold-blooded, able to cover his tracks. Someone who chooses his victims for a reason. He started to build a psychological profile of the killer. Female, probably late 30s to early 40s, educated with access to information about the victims, probably suffered from male infidelity herself. By the end of the week, Vaughn had assembled a whole folder of circumstantial evidence. No direct evidence, but the picture was getting clearer. There was a serial killer in Colorado, and he was targeting unfaithful men. Fletcher Reed's body was found in his apartment in Boulder. At first glance, a classic suicide. A man in an expensive suit was lying on the couch next to an empty glass and scattered sleeping pills. Detective Vaughn arrived on the scene before the CSIs. This time, he knew what he was looking for. Inspected the apartment. Perfectly clean, no signs of a struggle. On the coffee table, a bottle of expensive wine and a suicide note. Too clean, he muttered, looking at the impeccably straight lines of the letter. Too perfect. Questioning the neighbors yielded an unexpected result. The concierge remembered a woman in a business suit going up to Reed's apartment in the evening. Said she was on business, she was carrying some papers. Vaughn returned to the office and spread 3 cases on the desk. Hunter Trent, beaten to death in a hotel. Fletcher Reed, overdosed in a hotel room. And now a second Fletcher Reed, alleged suicide in his own apartment. It's a frightening picture. All the victims were successful middle-aged men. All had a history of marital infidelity. All cases involved a mysterious woman in dark clothing. He started to map out the pattern. Red threads connected the photos of the victims. Blue threads connected the crime scenes. Yellow threads connected the dates. Gradually, the killer's handwriting emerged. "Look," he explained to his colleagues. "The first murder is disguised as a robbery. The second, an accident. The third is a suicide. She's learning, perfecting her techniques." Forensics found traces of sleeping pills in Reed's glass. Same stuff as in the first Fletcher case. Handwriting experts confirmed the suicide note wasn't written by the victim's hand. Vaughn dived into the victims' backgrounds. Hunter Trent divorced after multiple affairs. First Fletcher Reed dated his ex-wife before marrying another. The second read led a double life, cheating on both mistresses. "We have a serial killer," he reported to his superiors. "She's targeting men found to be unfaithful, probably experienced betrayal herself. She's cold-blooded, planning every move." The press had already picked up the story. "Colorado Vigilante," the headlines screamed, "punishing angel for unfaithful husbands." Public opinion was divided. Some demanded the killer be found immediately, others secretly sympathized with her. Vaughn paid no attention to the hype. He methodically collected evidence, interviewed witnesses, checked surveillance tapes. The killer was smart, but even the smartest criminal leaves traces. There's a new board in his office. It had photos of the victims, a map of Colorado with marked murder locations, a timeline. He could sense the next crime was just around the corner. "She's not going to stop," he told his assistant. "It's her mission to punish unfaithful men. The question is, how does she choose them? How does she find out about their infidelities?" The answer came unexpectedly. In the second read's file, they found a business card for a detective agency specializing in marital fidelity testing. Vaughn sensed it was a clue. Detective Vaughn sat in his office, looking at the business card of the fidelity check agency, a plain white rectangle with a logo and website address. That card, found in the second read's wallet, could be a clue. Tech department cracked the site's security. Turns out the agency specialized in marital fidelity testing. Clients are mostly wealthy women who suspect their husbands of cheating. Owner is one Sawyer Blackwood, 32, successful realtor. Vaughn studied the agency's database. Hundreds of clients have come through in the last year. All 3 victims are among them. Hunter Trent was checked out at his ex-wife's request. The first, Fletcher Reed, at the request of his fiancée. The second, Reed, at the request of one of his mistresses. "That's how she picks them," the detective muttered. "Perfect hunting position. She knows all about their infidelities, habits, schedules." He sent a request for a meeting with Sawyer Blackwood. The official reason was spousal infidelity counseling. The meeting was scheduled at her office in downtown Denver. Sawyer made an impression. Slender brunette in an impeccable suit, sharp mind, professional acumen, diplomas and certificates on the wall, the latest tech on the desk. "We guarantee complete confidentiality," she explained. "We collect only legitimate information from public sources, no phone or mail hacking." Vaughn listened intently, noting the details. Impeccable manicure, expensive watch, confident movements. Nothing gave her away as a killer, but he sensed something was wrong. "Did you know Hunter Trent?" he asked carelessly. "Or Fletcher Reed?" "Only as clients," she replied calmly. "More specifically, their wives were our clients. Sad stories. In both cases, the worst suspicions were confirmed." The detective examined the agency's financial records. A legitimate business, all taxes paid, client base growing. The perfect cover for someone who chooses his victims. He checked Sawyer's alibi for the dates of the murders. Flawless every time. Business meetings, surveillance tapes, witnesses, too flawless. "She's smart," he reported to his superiors. "Uses her business to identify unfaithful husbands. Knows all their secrets, habits, weaknesses, and then passes judgment." The agency's database became a goldmine for Vaughn. He studied every client, looking for potential victims. All the murdered had traveled the same path, vetting through the agency, confirmation of adultery, death a few months later. Now the detective knew where to look for the next victim. All that remained was to prove a connection between the agency and the murders. But Sawyer Blackwood was cautious. No direct evidence, only circumstantial coincidences. Vaughn set up surveillance on the agency's office. He studied clients, wrote down license plates, tracked employee movements. He knew sooner or later the killer would make a mistake. Operational data on Sawyer Blackwood was on Detective Vaughn's desk in a thick folder. 32 years old, Colorado native. Successful career as a realtor, impeccable reputation, no trouble with the law. But 3 years ago, her life changed dramatically. Her husband, Ethan Blackwood, left to a young colleague, leaving only a note on the kitchen table. Friends told me that Sawyer took the betrayal hard, sold their shared house, changed jobs, cut old ties. Vaughn studied her photos from that period. The happy couple with the Rocky Mountains as a backdrop. Sawyer in a white dress at the wedding. And then there was the lonely woman with the faded gaze. Ethan moved to California with his new wife. The divorce went quickly. Sawyer didn't seek compensation or alimony. She just signed the papers and started a new life. She immersed herself in her work. Within a year, she became the agency's top realtor, bought a condo in an upscale neighborhood. And then, out of the blue, she opened a detective agency. This is where it all started, Vaughn thought as he looked through the paperwork. Personal trauma turned into a mission. She started looking for traitors like her ex-husband. Testimony from former co-workers painted a portrait of a strong but obsessive woman. After the divorce, Sawyer changed. Tougher, more cynical, often talked about male infidelity, how adultery should be punished. Vaughn found her old diaries in a digital archive. The entries got darker and darker. They're all the same. They think they can play with other people's feelings. Someone has to stop them. The detective traced her financial history. After the divorce, large insurance policy on the house, investments in securities, realtor income, enough to ensure independence and fund a covert mission. He interviewed the agency's female clients. They all spoke favorably of Sawyer. She helped expose unfaithful husbands, supported them in times of need, gave divorce advice. Perfect cover, Vaughn pondered. A legitimate business, impeccable reputation, and underneath that facade, the cold calculation of a serial killer. Agency employees described oddities in the supervisor's behavior. She personally handled cases where there was evidence of adultery. She was interested in the details of her clients' personal lives, collected files on unfaithful husbands. Sawyer's apartment was searched undercover. Nothing suspicious. Perfect order, minimalist decor, office with a computer. But they found encrypted files in closed cloud storage. The tech department was working on decrypting them. Vaughn sensed there was a clue. Evidence that would link a successful detective to a series of mysterious deaths. He returned again and again to the moment of the fracture. What drove a successful woman to become a killer? Personal trauma, a thirst for revenge, or the cold calculation of a justice system? The denouement came on a cold January evening. Detective Vaughn received the decryption files from Sawyer's cloud storage. Dozens of dossiers on unfaithful husbands, detailed surveillance plans, hotel layouts with escape routes, and most importantly, a diary where she described each murder. The task force surrounded the agency's office at dusk. Sawyer was working late as usual. She wasn't even surprised to see a detective with an arrest warrant. "I've been expecting you," she said calmly, rising from her desk. It was bound to happen sooner or later. At the police station, Sawyer held herself with confidence. Refusing a lawyer, she asked for a confession herself. Vaughn turned on the tape recorder, and she started talking. "It all started after Ethan left. I realized there are thousands of stories like this. Women suffer and men go unpunished. Someone had to bring justice." She recounted each murder in detail, without emotion, as if she were compiling a report. Hunter Trent is the first victim, a test case. Fletcher Reed at the hotel, a more elaborate plan. The second Reed, an almost perfect crime. The agency became the perfect tool. The women themselves came to me, telling me about unfaithful husbands. I picked out the worst ones, the ones who were particularly cynical about playing on other people's feelings. Vaughn listened, taking notes. The story of a single woman turned cold-blooded killer, a personal trauma that turned into a mania for justice. "I have no regrets," Sawyer said at the end. "They deserve to be punished. Perhaps other men will think twice before betraying those who believe them." The trial took place 6 months later. 3 proven murders, perfectly planned and executed. The press dubbed her the Colorado Avenger. Public opinion was divided. Many secretly sympathized with her motives. Sawyer's last word was brief. She spoke of betrayal, of broken hearts, of women whose lives had been ruined by unfaithful husbands. "I have become the voice of their pain," she said. "A voice that cannot be ignored." The sentence is life in prison without parole. Sawyer listened calmly with a slight smile. She had already accomplished her mission. Detective Vaughn was present at the announcement of the verdict. He watched as the woman who had turned a personal tragedy into a series of perfect murders was led away. The case was closed. Justice had been served. But somehow he didn't feel satisfied. That evening, sitting in his office, he looked through the crime scene photos. 3 dead men, 3 broken families, and 1 woman determined to be judge and executioner. A week later, all of the Colorado Vigilante case files were archived. But the detective knew this story would live on for a long time. About the thin line between justice and revenge, about the price of betrayal, about how personal pain can create a chain of irreversible events.